important as lights, cameras, action. Well executed, I'm the main attraction. Engaging vibes is where I wanna be. Enchanting lights and smiles is all you see. So I ain't thinking about the next one. Snapping pics, they be loving my fashion. Great drinks, great friends, and it's flowing well. It's a perfect event. Shout out Riel.
I'm Khary. Good to meet you both. I just read your bios, and I'm clearly about to have a conversation with three individuals way smarter than me. So I'm excited. You guys have done some impressive work, and I'm looking forward to engaging you. I'm new to this platform. I don't know if you used it before. Have you?
No.
That's my first
This
time.
is my first time on this platform as well.
Okay. So mistakes are allowed then?
Yes.
All right. I read through, the questions that I'm going to toss your way, and they're all in your wheelhouses. So we should have a real robust conversation.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Where are you all based? Where are you based?
I'm in Virginia Beach, Virginia.
Awesome. Okay. And I think Dr. Robinson stepped away for a second.
Oh, no, my reception keeps going in and out. Can y'all see me now or hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Okay. I'm in New York City. Sorry about that.
Okay. My best friend is in Harlem, and I'm talking to him every day. How are things going there for you?
They're going all right. I'm in East Harlem.
Okay.
So yeah, and the sirens going off multiple times every hour. So.
Wow. Times like these, huh?
I know.
I don't know if I ever imagined seeing a time in my life when something would happen that would mute people's money, power, influence, title.
All at once.
All at once.
All at once.
Around the
That's
world.
the big thing. All around the world.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This is something.
And kind of put everybody back at that humble stage.
Mm-hmm.
Like we all kind of, even though it's not an equal playing field, but everybody is feeling the same pain in some form of fashion.
Yeah. I don't know if we'll ever see a time like this again in our lives. If you don't mind me asking, do you have children?
I do.
Really?
I have 2 boys.
How are they adjusting to the pandemic and to this climate?
It's been a lot of questions and a lot of conversations. They're 7 and 9.
Oh, wow.
So, exactly.
Mine is 6.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it's like not wanting to take their innocence yet, but understanding that, okay, this is what world is right now. And how do we go through it? And just trying to make them safe and answer their questions on their level, not giving them too much information.
Uh-huh. And what is mom doing for self-care?
We're working on that. We're working on it.
That would have been my answer too. I'm still working on it.
Still working on it.
I'm doing better than I was in March and April, though. So I'm great.
I would say that I'm trying. It's a work in progress because we're wrapping up the end of the school year. Mm-hmm. So have that and wrapping up their school year, and it's just been very interesting.
Wow. Yeah. What about you, Doc? How's it been?
It's been all right. I don't have children.
Okay.
I have a grown foster son who's in law school, so I don't have to. I don't have the same number of hats that I have to wear that y'all have to wear. So I commend you in this moment. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you see, there's still some burden for everybody. So
Yes, exactly.
I don't know where our 4th is. I guess we were technically scheduled to begin around 5:05, and we're past that mark now.
Yes.
I see Jane has commented that she can hear us. Jane, can you still hear us?
We can still hear. I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure out how to get Erinn in.
Okay.
Right now, it's only letting me have 4 people, and I'm the 4th person.
Okay.
So I'm trying to figure that out. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Do you want us to wait or go ahead and?
No, I'm going to have you all just continue. We might have her coming near the end of the session.
Okay. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to go on and get started. Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Because we've got a lot of good questions and good stuff to talk about. So let me officially welcome you both, and to those who are joining us and participating in this panel. I'm pleased to have you. I hope if you all were able to chime into our pre-conversation, I just want to say on behalf of all the organizers of this summit that we do hope and pray that all of you listening and viewing are doing well, not only in the pandemic environment, but in this environment that is rife now with tension, possibly paradigm and consciousness shifting, and all of those things that play into this. Times like these have a way of putting the world on pause, but we still have to deal with critical matters, and our children and their development and their educational processes. Unfortunately, those matters do not take back seats to pandemics or police brutality concerns. So we have to talk about what education is like in or out of those environments, and that is why we're here today. So let me introduce myself as your host. I am Khary Turner. I'm executive director at Coleman A Young Foundation. I'm also an artist, and I am based in Detroit, Michigan, and I'm honored to be with these individuals who are here to discuss this topic. I will give a brief introduction, but I will also then give them a few moments to introduce themselves and address any concerns ahead of the robust part of our talk that they want to address. We are joined by LaRtia Smith. And LaRtia, you just said you're based in Virginia.
Yes.
And you're coming out of Regent University, and you've got a master's there in special education with a reading specialization endorsement. And you're also currently working as an academic director, ensuring that students have access to the modification and accommodations that create conducive learning environments. What that essentially means is that you're very busy right now.
Yes, I am.
So thank you for joining us, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you more and hearing from you. And then we have Dr. Robert Robinson, who began his career as a K-12 teacher, K-12 teacher. You spent several years in K-12 education, but you are now Dr. Robinson, and you've got a PhD from the City University of New York in urban education, with a concentration in Africana studies from the Grad Center there. Glad to have you here. You also have done some really interesting studies, including doctoral research on the Black Freedom Movement with, it looks like, an emphasis on the history of the Black Panther Party's Oakland community schools, which too often takes a back seat to some of the popular rhetoric around the Black Panther Party. So I'm really interested to hear your thoughts and pick your brain, and glad to have you both here. And we're also waiting for a third individual to join us. That is Miss Erinn Reed, who's a 20-year education professional with tutoring experience teaching from kindergarten through the 7th grade. And she is coming to us by way of the University of Kansas, by way of the AKAs, and by way of Tailor-Made Learning, which is her own entrepreneurial education and educational endeavors. So welcome to all of you, and I'm glad to see you all here, healthy, happy, and hopefully whole. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Indeed.
Thank you for having me.
Let me yield the floor and give both of you an opportunity just to take those introductions and run with them. LaRita, why don't we start with you? Just tell us a little bit more about yourself, any passion points that you have, and what you hope to accomplish in this conversation.
Thank you. I really am so happy to be on this panel and just really having this discussion. My biggest passion is special education. Not only is it that I took that time to get mastered in it, but it hits home. I have a son who is high functioning autism. And even at a young child, they said he won't be able to read, or just go ahead and put him in an institution because he cannot learn. And to any mother or father, that is like detrimental. So moving forward, I made sure that we had him definitely in any program that I could find. But as the mother, I was like, okay, it's time for me to go back to school to ensure that I can make sure that this young Black man will be educated. Mm-hmm. And now he is in 3rd grade and he is in advanced programs and he is flourishing. And yes, we still have our trials because dealing with autism has its ups and downs, but he is where he's supposed to be. So special education is definitely my passion. And I make sure that every parent understands that your child can learn. It just may not look traditional. And I have worked in inner city Newport News. I've done private sector as well. But every experience, I make sure that I take back and give so that all parents have the tools that they need. So I'm really looking forward to our talk today.
Awesome. Wonderful. Dr. Robinson.
So as you said, I started off as a K through 12 teacher. I taught 2 years at private elementary, and I taught the bulk of my time as a high school English teacher from grades 9 through 12 back in California, from San Diego, California. And then I currently mentor early career teachers through Columbia Teachers College, their induction program. So I work a lot one-on-one with teachers. And I also work with the CUNY Pipeline program for first generation college students who are interested in doctoral studies. And so I'm also mentoring undergraduates who are in their last 2 years of college. So a lot of work between, switching the hats from direct teaching of high school students to working with teachers and undergrads. And then my research is in the history of education. My title of my dissertation is Stealing the Meeting, which is an old enslavement practice wherein free Black folks would sneak onto the plantation to teach enslaved Black folks how to read and write. And so I use this as the framework to look at education from enslavement into the present, thinking about how we've always done education. We've always looked out for our youth. And that narrative that we talk about Black families not caring about education is counterproductive, and it's a revisionist history about how Black folks have envisioned education. And so, looking at the Oakland Community School that was created by the Black Panther Party for self-defense, I look at that concept over time and offer some ways to look at education in the present, thinking about what we've always been doing since the beginning of public education, which we actually gave to America. So you're welcome, America, for public education.
So I like it.
Yeah.
So okay, I have some questions that I established that were established before we met. But listening to both of your extended introductions, it gives me pause, and I want to pivot a little bit and ask this question. And I'm just going to try my best to just kind of jump right into some meatiness here. Both of you work with youth of African descent, and you have experience working with the history of education and children with acute needs in educational environments. So let me ask you both a double-edged question. What kind of fortitude, in your experience, has it taken to advocate for children in a way that is just, and in your answers, talk about some of the bias that you've had to overcome to adequately and properly represent the young people that you work for.
Wow, that's a really great question. For me, is especially being in special education, that ADHD label that gets so quickly put on our young Black men and their behaviors. So, and it's not always, number one, boys have natural energy. And then you add in how quickly they get diagnosed with ADHD. And then you add in now teachers are not always properly educated on how to interact with children with that label. So now we're talking about the behaviors in the classroom management, and then it's straight to the principal's office. So where I jump in is making sure teachers have those tools, and as well as educate the parents on how to structure home life, and so that it kind of mirrors school life so that they're successful. And to have those dialogues and say and advocate that that child be in the classroom setting and not in a separate classroom setting or alternative school is always a battle, because they really would just rather suspend, and then that child is now put out of school. So I have a lot of parents that come to me saying, okay, Ms. Smith, we're on our last strike. What do I do to keep my child in school?
And I can imagine the impact that it has on that child psychologically.
Yes.
It's almost a form of pre-institutionalization. Is it, am I going too far if I say that or suggest that?
No, actually, that whole, pipeline from school to prison, a lot of that is true, because you see systematics put in place that same children of different ethnicities may exhibit kind of mirror image behaviors, but they're given more chances, or the teachers of their same color are able to, okay, this is how I would handle this. I don't know how to handle a Black child when they do that, or I don't know how to respond to the parent, or I don't feel comfortable reaching out to this mother. So with those conversations, or the fact that it's like, well, those children or these children act this way, when there's, I guess, more familiarity. They feel more comfortable disciplining or redirecting their own, but not for our children. So then it's that whole pipeline. Well, this child is misbehaving. This child can't learn in this environment. That's a really key term. This child cannot learn in this environment. So then they want to give an alternative environment.
Wow. Dr. Robinson, what about you? You know, we tackle that question. We're talking about fortitude that it takes and biases that you faced. On your position on this spectrum, how has that impacted your career and your work?
If possible, I'll try to tackle from multiple vantage points.
Please.
So as a teacher, it was difficult. One of the things that kind of drove me back to school to receive my PhD was the overwhelming number of students who felt like their teachers didn't believe that they were smart enough. And so I would be in, I worked in my same department for, like I said, over 9 years. And was a leader in the department the last 3 to 4 years of the time that I was teaching, and hearing so many of the teachers begin their reflections on their classroom practice saying, my kids can't, and thinking about the number of students who are always sent to the principal's office and who those students are, and hearing Black men and young Black men, young Black women talk about their experiences in classrooms and feeling like they're on the outside. And so what it meant for me as a curriculum writer to kind of push the teachers to say, your kids are ready for this content. And you have to believe that they are. And that the students themselves felt like that their teachers were always speaking to them as if they were stupid. And so it wasn't so much that the students were incapable. It was that the teachers had already deemed the students incapable. And so fighting that and thinking about that deficit framework that we have towards Black students in classrooms, and then also thinking about students who, by the time they've gotten to 9th grade, right, you think about all the years of education and all the ways that they've been socialized into education up until that point. And so I've had students who've been told that they can't read well, they can't write well, they're not a good student, English is not my subject. And thinking about math is, I'm not in math, but like thinking about ways that we've already trained students to believe a certain thing about themselves before they get into the classroom. And so they're already used to being positioned as outsider. They got it down completely. I told the students, build the classroom the way that you want it to look. I give them a community service credit if they came and like reorganized the classroom before the school started. And almost every time students are facing their desks towards the front of the classroom in rows. And so I have this Carter G. Woodson, quote about like if you train the man, I'm paraphrasing, but if you train the man to always go to the back door, you won't even have to train him after a certain point. He'll automatically go because his education demands it.
Yeah.
And so thinking about the ways that, like, as instructor in my work, just as a teacher and as a teacher of teachers, there's so much work that we have to do to create an unlearning process for the 80% white women teachers who are teaching Black students,
yes,
and the unlearning process for the students, particularly Black students who have been socialized into a white supremacist framework in education. So,
okay, so you just killed it.
It's exhausting. I'm sorry.
Really
to answer the question, it's exhausting.
And it's so sad because for me, I'm on the elementary level. So I'm trying to stop it before it gets to your level, the middle and upper high school. But they hear it from the moment they're in kindergarten that they can't read or they can't write, or just all those negativities that they carry from each grade. So then you see that they're reading behind each grade. So then that crushes their self-esteem even more. So now you have a 5th grader who's still reading at a 3rd grade level. And now they're going into 6th grade.
Yeah. And some of them are in 9th grade.
And exactly.
Dr. Robert, you use the term deficit framework. Are 80% of the teachers creating this framework white women? Is that
I mean, the numbers that we see are either creating it or reinforcing it. Or
that
both.
Creation. What do studies say about what fuels that critique of Black children? Is it intentional, or is this a bias that they get honest?
I think some of the studies that I've seen just in practice are like a lot of implicit bias conversations that have been happening in schools. And so I think some of it is very much implicit, right? But I'm thinking about in my teacher training, which was, it seems like forever ago. We won't talk about time, but in my teacher training, even then there were like 3 labels that you have for. They always broke down the lesson, like, here's how you differentiate for students.
Yes.
And they're like, how do you differentiate? And the labels that they use are for English language learner, for a special needs student, and for an at-risk student.
Yes.
And so I taught at a Title I high school. And so for people who don't know about Title I, it's like 100% of your students qualify for free or reduced lunch. Free or reduced lunch. 100% of our students actually qualify for a free lunch. So that's economically gives you the context. About 3% white kids in the entire school. So, but that according to whatever they say is at risk, like that would be my whole student population. So like we're going in, if the at risk is that concept in that framing, then you're telling me as a teacher that 100% of the students I teach are at risk. And so reminds me of that W.B. Du Bois questions, like, what does it mean to, how does it feel to be a problem? Like that's the framework that I entered education in.
So what at risk is such a touchy term, because I mean, where I come from in Detroit, at risk could easily be, rearranged to say, we're simply called higher, based on our circumstances. And I'm wondering, what do you think it takes to change the mentality that creates these labels? Maybe people would argue that these terms come from years of study, but isn't the mere choice to study in a certain direction subjective in itself? And kind of puts the so-called scholar in a position to almost pursue a judgment ahead of actually proving that it's the case. What does it take to change that mentality?
That's a really good question.
I know. I'm really. I feel like it will take more of us creating that our own studies and creating our own novels and becoming more doctors and creating more of those dissertations that say, let's change these labels, dive deep more into at risk, taking that term away, but really identifying, I guess, more so the characteristics. That's a really heavy question. Really heavy question.
Mm-hmm.
I do agree. I think that it takes more Black scholarship, but I think that the scholarship is there. I think it takes schools centering that scholarship. I think that the work is there. I think people are doing it. And I think the difference between what I've seen among my colleagues and what I'm seeing in schools, the vast difference. You know what I mean? Like I'm only responsible for directly working with 3 to 5 teachers, and then a whole cohort of maybe 15 or 16. So like that's the small pocket I'm working with. But I'm thinking about the numbers of schools who are not looking at the scholarship that's already out there. I think it also takes like the reframing. I think the reframing also comes from, instead of centering the student as at risk, thinking about who's doing the targeting. So repositioning our framework to talk about like what are the deficits of the school, but like what are the assets of the students, and how are teachers building on that? And I think that framework needs to be in teacher education programs. It needs to be in school professional development programs. I think it needs to be I think whole new schools and school systems need to be rebuilt to recenter that on Black and Brown students' development. Yeah, but that I mean that we're talking about, even those are individual instances. I think the bigger question is like, what does it mean for us to radically reimagine education as a whole? And we're talking about a project, right?
So let me break in, because our third guest, Erinn Reed, has chimed in writing, and I want to share her thought. Hi, Erinn. She says we have to be very intentional in our language when we're dealing with children. Our words carry power. When we begin to see and approach education from a holistic standpoint, we will begin to see needs. What does that mean to you when you hear Erinn's thought?
I agree. Yeah,
I agree. But then I look back, and when you say holistic, no two children are the same. So I feel like kind of we go to that point of looking at everybody in that same, because you could have the same community and the same school, and that is classified as at risk, but then there's children within there that don't meet those criteria. But just because they live in that neighborhood, that they're now having to carry that title. So I would say I like the holistic approach, and definitely words do carry power. But then I really would say we have to start establishing more relationships and looking at more individualized, what is these children need. And I mean, I go back to the basics, not taking all these different labels away, all these different things that we have learned in education, and go back to, okay, this child needs this, let's give that child that. This child needs this, let's give that child that.
And Erinn, I want to invite you because the term holistic is definitely a touch point. If you want to chime in and deep dive a little bit in writing on how that breaks down, get granular with what the holistic standpoint looks like. I'm pretty sure that'll give us some more energy too. Thank you for sharing that. And let me while we're waiting on her thoughts on that, bring us up to now, this moment. We are in a pandemic. I don't know exactly what to call this environment. We're dealing with a pandemic, and we're dealing with the harm of Black bodies at the same time. We're dealing with a compounded paradigm shift in our country, and I think all of us are in a fighter's position. And what I mean by that is, you can plan your fight, you can talk about your terms of surrender after the fight, but when you're in the fight, you ain't doing nothing but swinging. You're fighting. So I don't know where we go from this moment in detail. I just know where we want to get to. So I want to ask you all, as it relates to education, before the pandemic, what were the environments like in your school, and how have they been impacted by COVID-19?
Good. You want to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Well, at the current moment, I'm in a private sector. So I didn't see too much of a paradigm shift in my realm right now. But then once the pandemic hit, I ended up kind of co-teaching and helping other districts get set up. So like our Norfolk district, which is a district that our students, our Black and Brown students, don't have access to like technology. And some of the teachers are—
We help them get set up for distance learning.
Yes, to get set up for this.
Okay.
And then and some of their teachers also weren't prepared for all this technology themselves as well, because it wasn't utilized on an everyday basis. So then educating those teachers to get them prepared with Google Classroom or any virtual learning platform. So it was, for my sector, the beginning, it really wasn't a paradigm switch for the private sector, but then going into the public sector and being able to be assistant, you definitely saw the disparities, which kind of hurt really bad.
How about you, Dr. Robinson?
Pre-COVID-19, I don't teach in California anymore, but my colleagues are still there. So I'm speaking from, what I know from my colleagues. And then from the teachers I support, I'm speaking from those two lenses too. So from the Southern California setup, especially in San Diego Unified, they waited before they went back to school. And so they let out the same weekend that New York let out, which was like, I think the weekend of like the 18th or 19th or something like that. And they waited maybe close to a month before they let schools back in. And so, which was like a tricky problem because New York started, they gave kind of like a week of a reprieve, and then they went in immediately after that week. And so what we saw were the differences between these two, and this is anecdotally speaking, but like just from what I've heard between the conversations between the teachers I support and the teachers I used to work with, is that they were able to, because they waited a month, were able to get all the computers and laptops out to students in San Diego who didn't have them. And then we're able to send them to the places that they needed to get internet service. Because New York started so soon, a lot of the teachers who I work with.
It looks like Dr.
Then you add to.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, what happened? Did I freeze?
Yeah. You
okay, I'm sorry. They were saying that their Zoom meetings, they hadn't had 100% attendance in the New York Zoom meetings. And a number of their students still didn't have access. And so they had cell phones that they used for digital stuff throughout the year, but what would it take to have cell phones at home where there's no Wi-Fi? And so you see like the disparities that are happening in the midst of the COVID era. Whereas before it was like, at least at schools, we had laptop carts, you had access, they had Wi-Fi at schools that they could access. And then when we really drove to the COVID-19, you just saw what the disparities look like because, like I said, when New York jumped in, there were so many factors that weren't considered that it only increased the disparity between students. So.
What's the potential impact of a child who loses essentially 3 months of a school year? 3 months of consistent instruction and guidance. What could be the potential impact down the road?
It depends on the home life. It really does depend on the home life because you do have some parents that continue to make sure their child is reading or have some form of engagement. It doesn't always have to be, when we think of education, sometimes we just think of just the books and just the rote memorization of certain facts and things like that. But everyday life can just really be education and going off into museums and field trips of that nature. But then you have some of our families who can't always readily afford that. You have parents who are working 2 jobs and the children are home pretty much, trying to keep everything together. So then you have that disparity. And we have something what they call the summer slide. So if you already factor in the summer slide where kids lose what they learn, half of what they learn, now we're saying it's going to be even greater. For me in special education, I'm praying every day. I'm sending my parents, okay, work on this. It doesn't have to be every day, but once a week, I need you hitting these facts. I need you to be reading, engaging. I need you to be doing these. So I try to prepare my parents that every week I need you to be doing something so we don't have that. So for some, it could be very detrimental. And then from others, they'll come in and continue to soar.
Speak to your adolescent self for a moment. From a mental health standpoint, what encouragement do you give to yourself to help you get through a time like this, where you're not only seeing the impact of a pandemic and potentially losing loved ones yourself, but then you're turning on the TV and seeing police officers with their knees on the necks of people who look like you. And you're supposed to make sense of all of this by the time school starts back up in September, enough to be functional and productive. What do you say to encourage your 12 or 13-year-old self?
Wow. I know.
Because I'm like, what am I saying to encourage my
exactly
37-year-olds?
Right.
Yeah.
That's a really difficult question to answer, because even as adults, we're still struggling with it. So if we as an adults are struggling, what do you say? What does a 12-year-old tell themselves? They look more so to their parents for that guidance. And if their parents are still dealing with it, I honestly don't know what I would tell my adolescent self.
And I didn't even add that on top of that, you can't hug folks.
Yeah.
Right.
You can't touch people. You can't, there's a large section of your humanity that you're not able to practice.
Right. You can't even see family because you're now, what if I'm asymptomatic? I don't want to endanger my aunts or my uncles or my grandmother. And grandparents are such a strong, caring. Most children run to their grandparents for that extra love. And so.
Well, let's leave that question open for a few minutes. And
yes,
that's, here in Detroit, Detroit at one point was, I think, the third most highly impacted city in America by COVID-19. And here, I sit before you now, completely pretending to have it together, just by virtue of the lack of closure that I and my family have had to deal with from people that we've lost and we haven't been able to say goodbye to. So I can only imagine what our children are going through, and they need some direction.
Yes.
And so I don't want to leave that question on the table without a strong attempt, not to put pressure on you. I'm not looking for you all to put capes on here and save everybody, but I just want to leave the thought open there. And in the meantime, I want to go back to Erinn's thought on the term holistic and what that holistic approach to education looks like. I'm going to read this, even though I think everyone can see it in the comments. It says, in teaching children, we are dealing with a human being with their own interests, to your point, LaRita, strengths, weaknesses, and learning styles. Holistic education, or dealing with the whole child, would entail taking all of those aforementioned things into consideration. For example, how the physical classroom and the typical school day is structured isn't conducive to all children, yet they're all subject to that type of setting. We must also begin to move away from teaching the curriculum from teaching the curriculum to using the curriculum to teach children. It is projected that there will be a 50% math decline and 30% decline in reading. And she ends her thought there. Does that trigger any additional thoughts from either of you?
I would just say, Erinn, preach. Like,
yes.
I'm with all of it. Yeah. Part of the reasons why I studied the school that I studied is because they were talking about teaching the whole child, and students had a hand in the curriculum creation. And so, and knowing that what we see as being like innovative parts of education today, that the Panthers are practicing this with with, you know, kids in elementary school in the 1970s and 80s. So I'm thinking about like just how right on that is. Yeah. Especially when we what LaRita was saying also with the math, the summer slide, this that projected 50 to 30% makes all the sense.
It does.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Robinson, what did the Panthers do in Oakland Community Schools that we need to retain or bring back for our children's sake?
That's a good question. So some stuff we've tried to do, and I think it just within the framework that we exist in hasn't always panned out. But students had a justice court, which is akin to what we talk about when we talk about restorative practice in education. And so, like, if students weren't working within the norms of the school, whether that was in interactions with each other socially or not committing to the classroom practice, like if they weren't all on board together, students would actually hold justice court after school and say, you know, what do we need to do to make sure that you're with us on this trip? You know, what does it mean for us to be a part of the big family? And so you have students grades 3 to 6 kind of, you know, holding each other accountable. And the adult in the room is merely there to kind of operate as a facilitator. And so I think that's a huge part of what the practice looked like. Students had the opportunity to, like in interviews that I have with former students who went to the school, what phrases that they bring up are that it seems like the teachers were learning with us. And so, you know, there would be this object of inquiry or question of inquiry. A student would pose a question and the teacher said that's a really good point. And the next day, that would be the framework at the foundation of the lesson. And so it's to Erinn's point about like using the curriculum to teach the child, like it's not, the curriculum is here. It's not curriculum focused, it's student focused. And how do we co-construct that curriculum together? And so I'm thinking about like even summer sessions. Teachers do summer planning. What would it look like if they introduce students into that planning session to talk about like what are you interested in learning and how do we meet these objectives together instead of putting those objectives onto the students and say let's go, but like more like let's do this together. Let's build and dream together and pay those students for their labor for the summer. Yeah. So.
What impact did that have on the students?
A tremendous impact. Every student that I've interviewed has talked about how their educational experience has been the best experience for them, and every adult. So the teachers that I interviewed after, they talked about their best teaching experience was at the Oakland Community School, even though some of them had careers, you know, up to 30 years after the Oakland Community School. So students went on. I mean, one of the students I have is a lawyer. 3 of the people I've interviewed are teachers. A student who works as a director of human resources, another student who's I mean, I could go through the list, but that doesn't mean that like all students came out. I lucked out with the sample that I had, but there were also students who, you know, also were subject to police violence, and students who also, you know, struggled through all the same things that are happening in Black America, you know, and so but you have a number of students who, even in hard times, there's a story that Erica Huggins tells about a man who, the building has now been turned into like a rehabilitation program for for people who were formerly convicted, and how he remembers, he just broke down in tears going back to the space. He was like, I went to elementary school here. And so thinking about how powerful, even in the midst of difficult times, what this place existed like as a safe haven for Black kids and Black teachers.
I've got, we've got about 5 minutes before we take questions from those who are watching and listening. So if you're watching and listening and you have questions, please get them ready. I believe there's a way for you to submit those through text or on this chat format. LaRita, I'm going to shift to you, and I'm going to ask you to talk about the impact of education on children, where they can see people at the front of the classroom who look like them early on. Oh, and that's my slide pitch for people for more Black folks to teach. But but talk about that impact on the child's development, please.
I guess I'm trying to think of a good analogy, but anytime you see someone like you in front of you and someone to aspire to, then it makes it 10 times more impactful. Mm-hmm. But then also a lot of times, even studies have shown that children see their mother or their father. I can even remember as many times in the classroom, a child accidentally say, "Mom." So to have someone that looks like you to educate you, it's powerful beyond words.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sounds like miracle grow to a plant.
It really is. I guess it's more so that connection and that community and being able to have conversations that you know that this teacher understands, or this teacher will take the time to understand. And children, they're just so sweet and so kind. So like I said, they see their parent in front of the classroom as well as someone I can aspire to be.
So this is probably the most personal question I'll ask both of you. And Erinn, feel free to chime in. Do you like teaching and why?
I love teaching. I love being able to shape and mold. Does it get tiring at times? Definitely. But I'm a person just by nature that always love learning. And I try to instill that same passion in my children. But definitely, I can't see myself doing anything else. I remember, I tell this story to a lot of people, but as a child, I used to put up all my stuffed animals and my baby dolls, and they were my students. So I was a teacher before I could be a teacher.
Oh yeah, you were serious. What about you?
To piggyback on that story, yeah, when I was a kid, we used to play school, but because I come from a big family, I'm the sixth of the seven. I couldn't become teacher until my younger brother's friends were old enough for me to be the teacher. So I was like, I was aspiring to be teacher for about 5-6 years, and I was like, finally, yeah. So to say that teaching has been a part of my career since elementary school. Waiting for my younger brother to get old enough so that I could test them out. But I love teaching. And I love the relationship between teaching and mentorship. And so seeing my work as a mentor now has helped me to realize that I was always doing